Hi, my name's Phil. I'd like to talk about politics. So it's been a while since I could be bothered to point out the rambling of the intellectual deserts that is Lee Anderson. But there was a beauty yesterday. He's like a YouTube unboxer, only Neanderthal is constantly unboxing his own arse on camera after other people have handed it to him, wrapped up in a nice festive bow. This time he was getting owned over his brainless comments on the new Grooming gangs inquiry. But first, for daily news and politics, please subscribe to the channel to stay notified. So, continuing this World Crocodile Day, let's have a look at the reptilian opportunists in Reform UK. They were in self-defeating mode yesterday, I felt. Both Lee Anderson and Nigel Farage, I think, made fools of themselves. But nobody throws custard pies into their own face quite like Lee Anderson. During the debates, led by the Home Secretary on the new inquiry being set up into grooming gangs, Lee Anderson attacks Labour for failing to act on historic child abuse. However, Yvette Cooper, who's no mug at the dispatch box, fired back with interest.
It is amazing, it is staggering that the Labour MPs can come here today and welcome an inquiry when they was given the chance. They all voted against one. But these girls, these victims of the Pakistani grooming gangs, they were kidnapped, they were abused, they were drugged, they were raped. And when they reached out for help, everybody ignored them. So there's little wonder they have no faith in the system. But they can regain faith if the Home Secretary agrees with me and appoints Maggie Oliver as chair of the inquiry.
Well, I would say to the honourable member, the child sexual exploitation and abuse, some of the most vile crimes that our country faces. And what Baroness Casey's report sets out in some detail, set out over 17 pages, just report after report after review after report after review, and so many of those recommendations never implemented. So concerns that were raised at the time of the Rotherham inquiry about issues around ethnicity, about issues around lack of information sharing, about lack of protection for children, simply not acted on. And Baroness Casey herself says, if we'd got this right years ago, seeing these girls as children raped rather than wayward teenagers, then I doubt we would be in this place now. He was a member of the previous government that did fail to do this, and I would hope that he would agree that actually successive governments, successive agencies across the country have failed to act on this, and we need to make sure that there is a proper independent inquiry, as well as, most crucially of all, the action by police to take the operations that will bring perpetrators to justice and put them behind bars.
Because this is the thing, right? Labour have not been in power even for quite a year yet. It's almost, but not quite. Lee Anderson was in power when the 7-year-long report, which the Conservatives commissioned, was completed in 2022. He was sat there on the government benches, right, saying not a word as the report came out, saying not a word when his own party government did nothing with it, saying not a word when in the 2 years remaining of their sordid time in power, not a single recommendation was implemented. Not a word about the victims or the Conservatives' lackadaisical attitude. During this time, however, Labour were preparing plans to tackle a wide range of abuse of women and young girls, resulting in one of their biggest policies to reduce violence against women by half over the next decade. Lee Anderson said not a word as Labour were working on ways to help female victims of all sorts of abuse, including victims of grooming, headed up by Keir Starmer, the man who organised the very first criminal investigations and prosecutions of grooming gangs, who pursued thousands of abusers, whilst the Conservatives, who were in government at the time, ordered a 7-year-long inquiry, which when published went straight into the Tory bin. If Lee Anderson thinks there was a desperate need for this inquiry and that it's been needed for a long time, why did he say so quiet? Why was he so quiet? Why didn't he say so when he was deputy leader of the party and in regular contact with the Tory Prime Minister? And when Labour were in power and said that they would implement all 20 of the recommendations from the report, he said nothing about it. Why didn't he speak out? Why didn't he say, great, I'd been privately telling my former colleagues to do this for years, because he owes no loyalty to the Tories anymore. He's free to speak about their burying the inquiry report now that he's in a different party. He's free to call out Kemi Badenoch's hypocrisy when she was the women's minister at the time. The inquiry reported back, and she personally did nothing to make sure the recommendations were implemented.
And one comment I would make is I think an awful lot of money, an awful lot of police time now goes into these historic offences and all this malarkey. And, £60 million I saw was being spaffed up the wall on, some investigation into historic child abuse and all this kind of thing.
It's bad enough for any Reform UK MP to try to claim that they care about the victims when none of them said a word until someone else made it newsworthy and did nothing to spotlight the lack of action after the original inquiry took place. But Lee Anderson looks particularly stupid when he was literally in power throughout the latter stages of the inquiry and when it was reported. But Lee Anderson wasn't the only one making himself look a little bit silly, although he did do it in the most spectacular fashion. Nigel Farage also. This needs highlighting more. He pointed out part of the report which raised the difficulty of getting information from some government agencies. Farage said, "This is a very important question. This needs answering." So why wasn't he in Parliament to ask then? The Home Secretary was there. She was there specifically to take questions from any MPs who had them on this issue. Any MPs who could be asked to show up and ask. Lee Anderson managed, although to be fair, if he wanted to use his arse later on to sit down for drinks, he needed to show up so Cooper could hand it to him. But Farage was, as usual, nowhere to be seen. It's all very well saying there are questions which need answering, but he's an MP. He is vested with the power of the people to question ministers and yet doesn't turn up to urgent questions or debates. This should be reported on more widely. Farage says there are important questions for ministers, but he can't be asked to ask them. Again. He was last sighted at a tennis club in Clacton on Sunday, I believe. Clearly what he does in order to avoid running into ordinary people, when he does have to attend his own constituency, which is a rare enough event, goes to a posh club that knows how to keep the riffraff out. Can't go wandering through the actual town. He might catch some terrible disease from the hoi polloi. But that was the day before. Where was he yesterday? I couldn't say. I just know he wasn't in Parliament while other MPs were discussing something Farage claims to be really important. Neither the Tories nor Reform UK have got anything to say on this matter. Neither said there should be another inquiry while the Tories were in power. Neither said the recommendations from the original inquiry should be implemented. Neither of them gave two shits about the victims. Kemi Badenoch still hasn't spoken to one. They just want to create more victims. In fact, because they profit from victims, they want to create as many as possible. As I showed in some recent polling the other day, Reform UK do best when people feel hard done by. And people don't support Reform UK when they think things are working out all right for them. The last thing Reform UK want to do is help people. That would be like Ronald McDonald encouraging people to go vegan. But let me know what you think in the comments below. And for more content, you could subscribe to the channel or even join for access to streams and behind the scenes updates. Thanks for watching. Until next time, I'll see you later.